the recurring theme today is communication between banders, prompt submittal of banding records, especially those with color bands, which is a huge issue right now, and reciting banded birds. Oops, yo, here we go again, okay. Sorry about this, I'm trying to get used to this thing here, back. Yo, okay, I think I got it now. Okay, because right now what's happening is because we have so many master banders that are here as well as beginners, we're going to be covering a lot of territory in a very short period of time. What we learned today, we're going to be able to apply to forest birds, to water birds, to seabirds. I thank Jay Penniman for bringing his crew over from Maui Nui. We are also, so the morning is divided into two parts. Sorry, I haven't used this little computer before. And the first part is this presentation. And during the presentation, if you guys have questions, please speak out. We're going to use the time for discussing issues that are on the slides. The second part of the morning is we're going to be comparing everybody's color bands in hand. So did anybody bring their color bands with them? Okay, I've seen a bunch of nods. Okay, so we have a board up on the back table, and it has good bands, bands that have not yet faded, hopefully, and then we have bands that have faded. We have, so that way we can compare, if we have any bad bands in our kits, we can compare it to them, and then we can toss those bands out. And then the second part, we're going to be looking at trap parts and trapping videos that Sam Goldstein bought and brought. Thank you very much, USDA and APHIS. There you are. Hi, Sam. Morning. And then after lunch, we're going to band birds and practice soldering color bands. And we're going to be using those bad bands to practice the soldering on. So you all should have received the Waterbird, you all should have received the Waterbird band list. Is there anybody that didn't receive it? Okay, good. So the two databases were started in 1992 by Mike Silbernagel, who is now retired. He turned over updating those two lists to Aaron Nadig in 2005, and then I came on board in 2007. The three of us estimate that over the last 25 years of these two databases, that more than 8,000 hours have been spent updating them. In the recites list, it had never been rectified, so I did this past year, and I spent 2,400 hours rectifying all of your data, all of your banding data and your recite data. How many of you, I was probably very annoying with the amount of emails that I sent out, how many of you received communications from me for help? Thank you. But now everybody's data is fully rectified, which makes it an incredible set of databases that will benefit everyone in the future, even if it's 100 years from now. Now we have two databases that start in 1948, and they run through to December 31, 2017. I've now started working on the 2018 update. We're now going to be doing the updates annually and rectifying them annually. So about halfway through rectifying the recite data, a pattern started to emerge, and I found that bands had not been submitted to the USGS bird banding lab. From here on, we're going to call it the BBL. And then what happened was, because the majority of these birds had color bands on them, because the bands had not been submitted, we ended up with duplicate color banding. So now we have sometimes 2 and even 3 birds banded with the same color combination, which essentially tells us everyone's study the baby out with the bathwater. It's like it becomes useless when we recite these birds. The other thing that I discovered was that many birds had been banded with the wrong size metal band. And so, which resulted in loss of leg or life. And then there were also, or injury or death from color bands as well. So these 3 big issues became the emphasis for this workshop today, so that we could finally get all of the banders in one place at one time, get us all on the same page with all the same techniques, reporting our record, all of our banding records, And because as banders, our foremost responsibility is to protect the health and welfare of the birds that we band. The study is secondary. So now, next slide here, thank you. Okay. So also, it was about 11 years ago, I joined the Western Band Birding Association, the WBBA in California. And I really urge you, it's inexpensive to do it. Their annual meetings are awesome. They occur all up and down the West Coast, places like Arcata Wetland, Milpitas, I think it's called, in northern San Francisco Bay. And there's demonstrations with hummingbird banding, waterfowl banding, you name it, raptor banding. The workshops are really, really awesome. If you want to learn anything about what previous meetings took place, just go onto their website. So it's just WBBA. So a little history first of bird banding, which I think is really essential because we do have a lot of beginners in the room today. How many of you have never banded a bird? A lot of people, okay. So the first record of a metal band was in Europe, and that was to a peregrine falcon in 1595. The next one was Audubon here in North America, and that was 1803. And he attached silver cords to the legs of a species that then two of the nestlings returned the next year. Then we go back to Europe again, and the next one was in 1899. There was a Danish school teacher, and he began to use aluminum rings with his name stamped on them. And that system today is what is being used now today. So, I mean, that system from then. Then we go here in North America again. We have somebody in 1902, and then in 1909. Has anybody heard of Jack Miner? Oh, okay. Jack Miner was a pretty awesome guy. He started banding waterfowl in Canada in 1909, and a little bit later he actually helped form the American Bird Banding Association. His data was used for the Migratory Bird Treaty Act between Canada and the US. If it hadn't been for him, we might not have that treaty today. Then so we have the treaty was signed in 1916, and then in 1920, we got the agreement between the US and the Canadian banding associations together. This here is Jack. By the way, his bands today are highly collectible. This little one over here, recently sold on eBay for $7,000. So Jack was inspired by a little girl who had written a calendar with a different Bible verse on the calendar for every day of the year. And so he got the idea to put these verses, Bible verses, on his bands. And so he hand-cut his bands, he hand-stamped them, and so all of his bands today continue to have Bible verses from his foundation. So what can be learned by banding birds? These are some very early reports here. So in 1949, we got a longevity record from a black duck in Michigan that was captured, after it was banded, it was captured 17 more times. On that last capture, its band was so worn that it was replaced. So now we have one of the first longevity records. Then in 1954, a pintail was shot in Mexico that had been banded in 1940. And calculating his migration, the bird put in 80,000 miles. Next one was a California biologist in 1957, and he was doing a food study, and he obtained a merganser from a hunter harvest. When he opened it up, there was a fish tag inside this bird's stomach from, where was that? Wyoming. Okay, so 64 million birds have been banded in North America from 1960 to 2017. These are only the birds that have been, the records that have been digitized. All of the records prior to that are in hard copies. So I'm showing up here copies of George Monroe's seabird banding. If anybody wants anything from him, or any of his original schedules, I have them all. So if anyone's doing any seabird research, I can send these to you. You see here, with how many stilts we abandoned. Can everybody read these numbers? So now we're just going into the rest of the workshop. We've gone through our history lesson. Thank you all for being so patient. Reading bird bands, the first thing is, I put this photo up intentionally. This is a photo that Forrest and Kim Starr took of the stilts in my yard. And I have the male on the left here, banded G-A-Y-Y, and the female is Y-Y-G-G. And one thing that you might notice if you're working with stilts is that she has unusual plumage with the black across the front of her neck. On Molokai, we have a lot of these birds, and these birds are part of the family that I'm studying now. I've been following a family for 17 years. The genealogy is on the back table there. I've been 5 generations with this family. So these are some of the topics that we're going to be covering. You guys already have your kind of agenda there with you, okay? So the first thing that's really kind of a biggie is the Bander's Code of Ethics. And we all have to remember that the birds come first, not the study. So it's kind of self-explanatory. So I'm just tossing a question out there. If you were to capture a bird after having run out of the correct size bands, would you use a band that's too large just so that you could say the bird is banded? Well, this has occurred. So, from now on, if anybody does this, put the bird back out and do not use the wrong band. Because every time you do, you're putting that bird's life at risk. So the next portion is, you have, please speak calmly, quietly when you're banding birds. No music, treat the birds with respect. Capture and process only as many birds as you can handle. One day I was with Lee Tibbetts and Dan Ruthroff, and we were capturing curlews over on Molokai, and we captured 6 in one bush net. We were a little freaked out because, well, maybe we won't be able to handle it, but we did. But not all the birds got geolocators on. We actually released a bunch of the birds without having to go through that process because we were very concerned about their stress level. Also, if you have a bird that's injured with your banding activities, stop your banding immediately and get care of that bird. Continually assess your own work. You know, I have seen banders that are really pretty sloppy, and I've scolded them. But you really need to be organized when you band, and you really have to keep thinking about the health and safety of that bird. Last thing here is communication between banders. Ensure that all your data is complete, that you submit your bands promptly to the BBL, and communicate with other banders that are researching with your target species so that we can get rid of all those double and triple combinations that keep occurring. You're going to keep seeing that throughout the day, is double combo of birds. So here we go, communication between banders. So here's one example right here. Sorry about the poor quality of the screenshot there, but so what happened was one bander at a site, banded a Hawaiian coot, failed to communicate with the other bander that was also banding at that site with the same species. A week later, the second bander, because there was no communication between the banders, banded the coot with the same combination again. Now this could have been prevented if the first bander had said, I use that combo. So luckily, the first bird was recaptured about a week later, and all 3 color bands had been lost. So that was really a blessing. But because the combo had already been used, only 1 color band was placed on the first bird. So now we do have, just out of a stroke of luck, 1 coot banded for that combination. Banders need to communicate with each other. So here we go through metal band types. The standard metal bands are provided at no charge to us. Once you get into the custom bands, those costs are up to the bander to consume. Here we have, in this lower photo here, we have some clamp down bands that are used a lot on waterfowl, and some species that are really good at even prying open some of the aluminum metal bands. So rivet bands are also in here. There's a rivet band on the top photo. Currently, the bands authorized by the BBL either have an 800 phone number on them or a website address. Bands that say write or advise on them were recalled 15 years ago. So I ran into records. These bands are still being used. So if you have, we all need to go through our banding kits. If you have anything other than the top two bands, all the other bands have to go back to the BBL. One issue with an older band is I was looking at the data, and here's a gallinule that's banded with this band that was issued 52 years ago, and I'm scratching my head going, well, maybe it's the wrong date. Maybe it isn't this bander, and it turned out that the person was still using these really old bands. But it kind of throws your data off in a way, you know, because you really don't know whether to toss it because the band is so old. These are the band sizes that we use on the coots, gallinule, the Hawaiian duck, and the Hawaiian stilt. We're going to be using today the species codes like HACO, HAGA. Those are the codes that are at the bird banding lab. There's a little confusion sometimes because the AOU, the American Ornithologists Union, uses some of the same codes, but other species are different. And I say as an example, barn owl. So the BBL code for barn owl is BNOW. It is BANO for the AOU. So don't be confused by the codes. If you have to do something per AOU, go ahead and use it for that purpose, but for the bird banding, you need to use the BBL codes. The BBL website lists the recommended band sizes for each species. So typically it's size 4. We're going to be going through the size 3A later. It is still on the BBL website. And right now, Marty Kawasaki is testing a different size band. Marty, what size? Is that the 4A that you're testing? 4A. Okay, so once Marty's testing is done, I'm going to be petitioning the BBL to remove this size 3A and to add the 4A when we make sure that it's okay for the birds. And we're going to get into those smaller band sizes a little bit later. So auxiliary bands, if you're going to be color marking a bird, you have to have BBL approval. So here on the left, upper left, I just started using flags this year in Hawaiian stilts. I purchased them from Europe. They come really long. They come about 3/4 of an inch long. I cut them all down to 1/4 inch because I was worried about it making interference during nesting, so I reduced the flag size as much as I could. But what's nice about the flags is it's twice as much real estate. It gives you twice as much visual size to be able to ID that bird. Also here are coot color-coded collars that I've tested. Each island has its own color. On the upper right photo is the band actually on the bird. And please take a look at this photo and take a look at how the collar falls on the neck, because we're going to be looking at a coot later on that should have been recognized as being in distress, but was not. So you can see how well they wear the collars. They really are very loose. When I apply the collar, I can stick my finger up through the collar, through the neck, and I know that that bird has plenty of space on the collar. I have a dowel that I actually slip in each time I check just to make sure that there's enough space. On the lower left, there's flags on coots. The Hawaiian duck here is one of Kim Uehara and Chris Malachowski's Hawaiian ducks. Then we have Lee Tibbetts birds with a flag, and then we have one of my whimbrels with the color bands on it. So with the whimbrel, you might be able to see the geolocator on her. These are the manufacturers of auxiliary markers. So in the upper left is Spinner Plastics, and then on the right is one of the birds, a collar from Spinner. On the left we have Pro Touch Engraving in Canada. Down at the bottom we have Interex, Poland, Marcin Faber. He's the one that made my stilt band, so you can see these flags here. On the left there you can see how long they come, and then you can see on the right where I cut them down. Interex also makes coated leg bands as well. It does pay to shop around because each band manufacturer has a different product or material manufacturer. So each one has different combinations of the actual material. One of the things that we're dealing with right now is that Stephen Hughes of AC Hughes, which is where AC Hughes supplies most of the color band users in the world. So all of a sudden my stilts, I was getting stilts that had the same combos, and I'm going, wait a minute, that's a male, but I banded it as a female, and then I realized after reading the bands that the bands were fading. And so I was getting red bands that turned stark white bands that turned yellow bands that turned white, blue that turned green, green that turned blue. And so I called up Stephen Hughes, and he says, oh yeah, the manufacturer changed the formulation a couple of years ago, and he's been getting complaints. Sadly, he didn't tell anybody, and he still continued to sell the bad bands. So one of the other issues we're dealing today with is the faded color band issue. Peter Shannon is one of my favorite to make coot collars. You'll see the difference in quality of his bands back on the backboard there. On that backboard I have bad bands, good bands, for everybody to compare. So these are some of the issues. Here are the bands. On this upper left photo here, this is Aaron Naden hung a string of coot bands up at JC. And followed them for 12 years to see, kept photographing them on an annual basis to figure out how the bands were fading. I see some of you holding your ears like this. Can you hear me, or? It's a little too loud. Too loud? Oh, how about this then? Oh, okay, sorry. I thought this was like, oh, okay. So all of these bands, or except the ones on the fence, are here today. And sadly, when the fence was replaced at JC, these bands got tossed. So now we're starting from scratch again. So we are no longer using the celluloid bands. I speak from experience. They will crumble, melt, sputter, spark, and actually catch on fire when you are soldering them or when they're stored in a sealed container. Typically, the color bands where the celluloid are used, they are glued shut, but in the Hawaiian Islands, we solder our bands because we reverse our spirals. And so, yes, upper left corner here, we have the shamrock spirals. These are used at Kohala Marsh. So whoever is banding at Kohala, please check your kits and make sure that no bands have opened like this. When a band like this is applied to a bird, it could cause injury. If you look at a color band, when you receive them, the inside band is cut straight, and the outside has a curve on the end of the spiral. When you reverse the spiral, that curved side goes in against the bird's leg, and the flat side is out. So if you were to use this band right here, once the spiral is reversed, that flatness of the band from opening can actually cause injury to the bird's leg. So banding and field kits, these are always pretty interesting. The first thing you really have to do is get a first aid kit. So for me, I have two. I'm a little obsessive. I band by myself. So the bird in the middle there was a banded sibling, and when I was stuffing the bird, I made it into a study skin. When I was stuffing the bird, the intestines and the abdominal cavity was completely solidly compacted with worms. And so of course it had died, but it gave me a hint as to why this bird here was so sick. So I was at a banding site and was able to pick up the sibling. I gave it a few drops of medication for worms because I knew that the sibling had had the issue. The bird stood up within a matter of hours and was released. So be prepared for as much as you can be. Okay, and this lower left is a Pacific golden plover that was captured in a mist net, and the net cut its neck. And so I use something called Yunnan Payao. It's a Chinese herbal medication that is a hemostatic, and so it'll stop bleeding, it'll seal cuts. And so for this bird, I sealed it shut with the powder, and then just put a little bit of liquid bandage on it and released the bird. There was no reason to hold the bird, it was fine. Does anybody here carry Yunnan Payao in their kit? These two know. It's like the miracle herb. Okay, so this is my banding kit, which I brought on the back table because we're going to be using some of the tools out of it today. I have just about everything that I need. I've got reverse pliers for removing a metal band. I have reverse pliers that I've outfitted for actually applying a coot collar. I have bolt sizers. You know when you go into a hardware store and they have those little bolt plates, you know, to size your plates? I use that to size bumblefoot on coots. That's pododermatitis. I work with a lot of coots at a wastewater facility. And so they tend to get really bad bumblefoot, sometimes even die from it. Okay, these are some other kits. This one on the lower right, I personally would not be thrilled with this because they have loose bands in a kit. And I see some people nodding. So one issue that I see with this is that I don't recommend this because bands get lost for starters. And also when entering your data into Bandit or your database, it's much faster if the bands are put into sequential order. Also, please take pity on Ginny and I because we're the ones that enter your data for long-term archiving. Because if we're dealing with all these different band numbers, it takes us a long, long time. Whereas if you band sequentially, there's a method in Bandit that you just click and it fills in all your bands, all your locations. So it does a lot of work for you, but only if your bands are in sequential order. So these are some more things for banding supplies. On the upper left here is cotton bags. I can't use those on Molokai because it's too hot over there. So instead I sewed bags out of laundry bag material, quarantine netting, and mosquito netting. And it's really lightweight. The bird can breathe fine in it. The bird remains cool, still calm. And what I also did, a little obsessive, but it really helps where you don't have enough coffee in the morning when you're banding, is I actually weighed each bag, weighed a piece of the tape, sent it out for embroidery, and then I stitched the weight of each bag on it so that it actually cuts time out of banding, and you don't have to re-weigh your bag each time. You know, you look at the number and boom, that's your bird, your bird weight. So it works good. Trap types. Josh, are you here? Josh Fisher made a couple of these for me back in 2007. They are hands down my favorite waterfowl trap. Josh, about how much does it cost to make one of these traps? Do you remember? $75. $75. That's really, really cool. So in one of these, black crown night heron have been captured, bristlecite curlew, hybrid koloas. These traps work really great. The lower right-hand corner is a photo of one of my banding sites. It has a predator-proof fence around it, and so I'm there at that location. I'm actually able to leave the trap out at night. So what I do is I put in solid cement blocks ones that don't have holes in them, and I put the blocks inside the trap so that the birds have something to stand on if they need it. I bait the trap at night, and then the next morning I go pre-dawn, like an hour at least before dawn, and then we pull all the birds out of the trap. Because of the way that the pintails and shovelers feed, it really helps to be able to have that overnight time period. Another trap is whoosh net. How many of you have used whoosh nets? And did you buy them? Did you make your own? I guess you're all purchased. And what?
Well, we bought our traps.
Bought yours.
I've learned how to make mine.
Okay. So Marty has come over to my place and made whoosh nets with me so that she could learn how to do it. Whoosh nets are awesome, especially in aquaculture farms where there's a lot of these little berms separating the ponds. So I have about 15 whoosh nets that I've made with all different kinds of configurations depending on the width of the berm separating the shrimp ponds. The only bummer with whoosh net is that there's a lot of luggage to bring along. You have your launch poles, your pole rebars, those are the rebars to hold your poles up. You've got bungees, angle irons, and rocks. For me, I always bring my rocks. I have 2 buckets of rocks that are like my favorite rocks because they're shaped just right in little triangles with the right angle on them. And sometimes when you get to a site, maybe all you can find is round rocks. And the round rocks, your poles will move on them. So I highly recommend a small bucket of rocks. Go ahead. Question?
Yeah, what exactly is a whoosh net? I don't know how it works.
Okay, perfect. And Josh, Sam Goldstein actually has a video of them being fired off that we're going to look at later. I brought a whoosh net. Sam, did you bring a whoosh net also?
Yeah, I got the
Bungee net. So a whoosh net is, excellent question, thank you so much. Give me another cup of coffee. Oh wait, yes, Sam.
So what are the rocks for? What do you use to
The rocks? Oh, pole support. Because what will happen sometimes in a wetland is the weight of the poles will continue to sag. So you put your rebar in, your pole in, and then you support your pole with a rock. Anybody has questions as we're going along, please ask. So here we have bungees that I've made. A whoosh net is a bungee-powered net. So you lay the net out in a square, you put in your poles, you attach your bungee cords, you go sit in the bushes with a pole line until the bird gets into the capture zone. And then when the bird is in the right spot, you pull the line, it releases the bungees, and the net goes boom over the launch poles. Now, an interesting thing about whoosh net is they fire in half a second. I once had a Bristol flag curlew escape from my net in under a half a second. It was in the capture zone, and in 3 wing beats, it went 1, 180, 2, 3, gone. So even though the net may fire in half a second, the birds can escape it. So it does take practice to get them in the right location. But they work awesome. And I'll show you a couple different photos a little bit later of just how they can work. So what I do in this lower left is I use a Kevlar spearfishing line for my pole line because it doesn't stretch. I found that at least with shorebirds, when you have a whoosh net and you have a nylon line, that line will stretch a little bit, and that little bit of movement is enough to frighten the birds and they go aloha. But with the Kevlar line, it doesn't stretch, so you can actually pull it to the point where you have tension and then just give it a tug. I put my lines on a kite reel so that when I clean my lines, because I disinfect my equipment every time I go to at the end of every banding session, it's disinfected. And so I wash my entire 300 feet of line by hand, dry it, and then reel it back up. So I purchased my net in bulk from Memphis Net and Twine, and then I dye it with an acid dye for various colors of where I'm banding at. So I have some that are really nice red, Molokai red dirt. I have others that are more yellowish. I have some that are black, and I have some that are really super dark green. Right here is an example of a whoosh net set, and you can see the bungee cords right here. Right there, and I am tucked in, Marty, I think Marty, you were with me with this, weren't you? Yeah, so we were tucked in a little gazebo. We were at the senior citizens facility on Molokai. And so we had put out all of our newly painted, thank you Marty, newly painted shorebird decoys. And I also put in, this net right here is 33 feet long. This is the first bush net that I got. I purchased it from a maker in the UK who's now retired. But I was not thrilled with the quality of this net, which is why I started making my own. What happens with this one is the splices that hold the launch rings were not melted really smooth, so when it was fired, the rings would then catch on the net and you'd get a misfire. And I also didn't like the way that he had his cotter pin set up because it would flip. And did we have a misfire once on this one, Marty?
No.
Not this
I
one.
didn't get a chance to fire it off, but I have a question.
Yes.
So I see you have like the two launch poles and one pole in the middle. Can you explain why you have a third pole?
That's brilliant. I was just getting to why I have a third pole in the middle. Thank you. So also I do have a third pole in the middle here, and that's because this is a long net, and it has a launch ring on each pole. So that middle tends to sag when you pull the line. And so that's where I put my bait, just right under the tip of that pole. So when the bird is there, that is the capture zone. And the net in the middle doesn't sag, so that extra little pole there, which is only 2 feet, I think, is enough to support the net so that when it's fired, it goes over the bird and it doesn't go directly down on it. Okay, this is a mist net. Here we have Sam again. And we're at Coheo Wetland. Mist nets are really awesome. I have 5 of them, which is enough to kind of blanket a small wetland. I prefer the 18-meter long nets, so those are what, about 60 feet or so. That way you don't have to have as many poles. So what I did is, for me, is I sewed a carrying case for the poles. For mist nets, because it's at night, you don't want to have nicks in your poles. Nicks in your poles sparkle in the moonlight, and the birds will see that and fly around it and avoid your nets. So most of your nicks come in transporting your equipment. So what I did was I got some heavy-duty material. I sewed it 2 layers. I put a yoga mat in between for a little bit of padding with a zipper that goes all the way around it. Now I know this may seem a little obsessive, but it has my poles, all my nets, my repair stuff, so that if I'm right on site and let's say I have a black crown night heron fly through my net, which has happened before, I have my equipment on site to then mend that net, and I don't even have to take it down. The other thing with, here we go. Here's my setup here. Sorry, I got the wrong one. Okay, so the mist nets, they can be purchased for about $150 to $200. The poles are about the same. It's a little bit of an investment, but it's well worth the investment. Let me see here. Where did they go with this? Hello. Another trick that Wally Johnson did, you know, Wally, that's the Pacific Golden Plovers, is he took his beautiful anodized poles, and he didn't want to nick them, so he took black masking tape and wrapped it all around them. And Josh, does he spray it also? Does he spray when he gets a little coloring or something on his masking tape, does he keep his poles black all the time?
He might, I don't know.
Yep. Okay, so here we have drop net. These are 2 of Marty's setups, actually. Drop nets are pretty cool. Marty's coming over to spend spring break and summer with me, so we're going to be making a lot of drop nets and a lot of bush nets. Marty, what are some of the issues that you've had with the drop net?
Hi everybody. So some of the issues that we've seen with drop nets is when you're putting them up, you kind of need to know your spacing. So every drop net is usually made differently. So if you're custom making your own drop net, that really helps because you know your net. Otherwise, it was a lot of just experimenting. I actually have parachute cord that I use to set up my drop nets, and that actually is my own, kind of helps me guide where I want to put my poles. Because if you don't have that and you're just like testing out your new drop net, sometimes you put the pull cord too tight, so when it falls, it doesn't fall evenly, and the bird can slip out. Other issues we've had with drop nets is setting them too deep, or possibly, don't watch your birds that you want to trap, see what the birds are doing. The bird, if for still, for some reason the water comes up to just under their butts, do not set a net there, because that drop net is weighted, and if you can't get out to that net quick enough, you could drown a bird. So that's one of the issues that we thought about when we were setting up our nets, watching the birds before placing your net. Watching behaviors is definitely a big thing. If you can set your net up on dry land, that's the best thing to do, because it just kind of takes the bird to the ground underneath the weights. You don't have to worry about injuring or drowning the bird.
So the drop net's been really, really effective for Marty. In a 3 field seasons, she captured 59 adult Hawaiian stilts. Yay, Marty, that's a lot of birds. The other thing you need with the drop net is you need a post popper and a post pounder, and then you need the large T-posts. So you still have a little bit of baggage, but not as much as a whoosh net. This is one of my favorite traps here. This trap was a swim-in duck design from a bird bander in the Sacramento River Valley, and it was about 10 years ago that he had already captured 30,000 wood ducks in this trap design. So I made it because I work at the wastewater facility on Molokai, and so I made it to be a walk-in trap. And you can see here, it's got the catch box door. I can explain this design a little bit more in depth later. But it works really good. The coots go right into the catch box, and you just pull them out. So Randy Riggs came over for 3 weeks to learn how to band with me, and she came over on her second time. I had made another one of these. She took all of the measurements, drew it out, which is in here, and if you want that design, I can email it to you. They take about a day to make. You actually construct them upside down. And then when you're all pal, you just flip it, you adjust your funnel, and you're done. The only issue is getting it from point A to point B because it's kind of wide, so I also have a pickup truck and I put a couple 2x4s across the back and I bungee it down and I cart it from one side to the next. But remember, every time you move equipment to a different site, disinfect your equipment. Next one, Charles. Ha 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 ha. Charles, how many gallon oil did you capture with these live capture traps?
About 260.
You say it a little louder, about 260?
260.
Yeah. So why do these work so good for gallon oil?
I think they're, well, I've heard a few different things, but in my experience, they're just extremely food motivated. And it took us a while to find bait that worked really well, but oddly enough, fresh fruit is the best thing. They go crazy for mangoes. But we pretty much tripled our catch rates using mango.
Bait is a really big thing. Okay, so you can adjust these for higher, lower sensitivity. Once you get the sensitivity on the trip plate to your liking, I like to put a little bit of oil right where that red arrow is. A little bit of oil on it. I prefer the marble oil, Calvin Willis over at Kalia Pond. Turned me onto it. It's kind of a girly oil. It smells really nice, but it's also very smooth. Okay, this here is a noose mat or a loop carpet. I just put up this setup in my yard just to demonstrate. They are really good for capturing a single bird. So let's say you have a stilt with a leg injury, and you really want to get that bird captured so it can go into rehab. You can remove the band, whatever. These loop carpets are really good for that. You can bait them and just pull the bird right in. The one downside is that they can take about 20 minutes to a half hour to kind of get set up. On the upper left photo, I just put it out on top of the grass so you can see it, but normally what I would do is set it in sand, and I would put sand all around, and then you pull up all of the loops so that when the bird walks across, its leg goes into a loop. When it pulls its leg away, when it's walking away, the bird is captured. But the one downside to this is that sometimes I like to read a book while I'm waiting for the birds to get like my capture zone. With this particular trap, you cannot do that. You cannot take your eyes away from this trap for 1 second, which means you don't text, you don't make a phone call, no nothing. Because the second that bird gets in there, you run as fast as you can to pull it out. But they work really good. So these here are made at Mike's Falconry Supplies in Oregon. They cost $150 each. He sends a whole bunch of different hooks to go down, like staples to hold it down under different wetland conditions or sandy beach conditions.
Have you used those for stilts?
Have I used this for stilts? Yes. And to capture a stilt with a leg injury. And they work really good. You have to watch your bird. So this is a thing, just like what Marty said, is know your birds. Each bird has a different way of bobbing its head or walking or even sometimes sitting and taking a nap. So I live with stilts at my house. I can identify the calls of about 20 different stilts. So at 1:30 in the morning, I'm sound asleep and I go, oh my gosh, she's home. Because each bird actually sounds different. And they look different and they walk differently. So if you're around your birds enough, you end up knowing your birds. So for this trap, I knew exactly what would attract the stilt into here, which I have a big, giant, oversized stilt carving. And so it tried to attack that stilt.
Was it hard to reset?
It's the resetting. So he asks, is it hard to reset? It's not difficult to reset. It's just that you have to take the time to pull out every single loop and pull each loop up. So when I store them, I flatten my loops down, and I store between these 4 pieces here fold up into 1 piece, and I have white cardboard in between each section to prevent the loops from getting tangled in storage. And then I take this, because there's still loops, and I slide it into a larger padded envelope. So the next is the net gun. I'll wait for the plane for a second, okay? So the net gun is another tool that's really good for capturing a specific bird, but it has downsides. First, it's $1,500, at least they start at $1,500. They go up to $2,500 depending on your setup that you're asked for. And then sometimes the handle leaks, the gas, which results in a dud firing. So when I was out trying to capture a snow goose last year that had been shot through the head, I went up 3 times. She got 3 feet from me, and each time it was a dud handle. The net just goes plop, and that's it. So they don't work all the time, but when they do work, they're really good. Josh, how many plovers have you captured with this? Dozens? Difficult birds?
35.
35, yeah. So, you want to talk about how to use this? He's the guy. Okay, so here we have one of Sam Goldstein's photos. Sam, could you please explain this air cannon, because I've never used one before.
Sure, so it's another cargo heavy tool, but it's essentially a large compressed air tank with 4 tubes into which you put weights that are connected to the net. So you use a air compressor to fill the tank, set your long net up, you can see how long it is. It's pretty wide. So and stand back with the ignition button and compressed air just like a net gun. So you got 4 tubes instead of 1. Launches those weights, which tracks the net up. It's a good tool, but you either need like a flock of really naive birds, or you have to set it out and do it. It's a big thing to put out from an environment perspective.
So what bait did you use for this at this time?
Bait.
Did you use any bait?
Nope.
No bait.
Maybe
Ooh.
bread, maybe bread.
Okay.
I think Josh was working on this, so, okay, maybe bread.
Yeah, but those birds are like fed by the kids every day, so they're coming out of the water.
Okay.
The park does.
Choose your location really well. That sounds like a rather, after it was all set up, a rather effortless capture area. Awesome.
It was, but try going back there again with it.
Yeah.
They won't come out of the water.
So ditto. So Sam was just saying, you know, the birds won't come out of the water anymore. So the same kind of thing happens with the use of the net gun. Once you fire it off, it makes a really loud noise. And the birds from then on associate you with that noise. So I remember talking to Josh about, he and Wally were driving around for hours and trying out different cars and stuff to hide so that they could capture this one last plover. And you did that for what, days? Yeah. And you know, all types of things like hats and switching vehicles, clothing. Once the birds recognize you, they recognize you. So Sam, here's a bow net, which I have never used. Is this real similar to what's called a clap net?
I don't know flat net, but people call it hoop net. Also.
Hoop net, okay.
Yeah, so this one is remotely operated. They do have full string ones, but it's essentially like the picture on the right shows it as it's deployed, so it's a big like oval, maybe 7 feet. And I brought it, so I have it here, but it's like a 7-foot long oval. Folds back on itself, spring operated in the center, kind of see what hinges, and just when you're ready, you got your target in the trap zone, and species use whatever bait, just hit the button, pull the door, snaps over. It snaps at a pretty good speed, but not terribly hard.
Do you know what speed it fires at?
No, but so probably either way, whether you use a pull cord or a remote, you want to have the bird sort of in the pocket because it makes a little noise. It's a little servo motor on the remote one anyway. Just makes enough of a little noise that even if the bird's head is down and it's feeding, it's enough to spook it and depending on the speed of the bird, whatever, get out before it comes over. I mean, we can set it up.
Okay, so if anybody wants to see that, you can help Sam set it up. Now, do you recall what species you trapped in this? And does anybody have a suggestion of what species might be good for here? Coots? Maybe gallinule? Yeah. So, also, after each session, disinfect your equipment. And so here, this is one of my employees. We are washing this particular trap at a wetland with a 10% solution. I didn't care about killing fish because it's all tilapia, gambusia in this little canal here. Okay. Again, keep your traps maintained. Repair them immediately because you can have a bird injury or escape. So trap malfunctions. Okay, so we've already talked about a couple of these, but the cotter pin on a worst net can get tangled in the line or the net, resulting in a misfire. Also, if the bird is not in the right place, which again, you have to be really careful with a lot of these traps, and if the bird is too close to the flake net and you pull the line, you can decapitate your bird. So you have to have the experience with this, and you have to practice before you use it on any birds. Drop net, Marty just explained some of her tension issues. Miss net, if you have it too tight, the bird will go boing and then bounce right off of the net. Also, we talked a little while ago about the birds can get cut with the miss nets. Swim-in traps, if the funnel on it collapses, the birds can't enter, so you don't catch anything. On the other hand, if the funnel is too high, your birds can escape. I had many times where my waterfowl would just swim right out the same door that they came in on. The walk-in trap, sometimes that I made, sometimes the side of it will catch on the side when you pull it up to keep the birds in. So Live capture trap, sometimes the trip plate is not sensitive enough. Net gun, we talked about the leak, and the carpet. Sometimes the nooses actually won't tighten, so that's why you really want to check them all. Yes, location, location, location. Choose your sites well. So I know this top photo is pretty blurry. Aquaculture farms are awesome. The birds are habituated to the shrimp being fed, and at this farm, every morning they're out there going, where's the breakfast wagon? So in this particular setup, and shorebirds also, like the curlews, the ruddy turnstones, sanderlings, the stilts, they all line up waiting to be fed. In a location such as this, you can actually set on the backside, set your flake net on the backside of the berm where those pipes are, and then have your bungee cords in the water, so that when the net is fired, you fire over that edge on the water line, and the net ends up actually in the water by like a foot or 2 feet. And your birds are right along the water line, so if you set it just right and you have just the smaller number of birds, you definitely want to have smaller. You wouldn't want to go out and capture this many birds at once. If you have a smaller number of birds, the bush net works really good in a location such as an aquaculture farm. On the left lower photo, we have the Kaunakakai Wastewater Reclamation Facility. It has been my research site. I've been volunteering there for 21 years. So I'm like the 4th employee. I set bait stations there. I trap predators. I use it as my primary research site. I come and go as I please. I don't know if anybody has that opportunity on this island, but wastewater facilities are awesome. It's nice because, again, we have a berm situation, so we're looking at where to set our nets. I leave my walk-in trap on the berm all the time, and I leave all the doors open all the time. So the birds go in and out, in and out. The hybrid Hawaiian ducks roost on top of my traps at night. They like it when there's more birds on top, and then they go under into the shade, and they take a nap during the day. So all the birds are habituated to this trap being there. When I want to then trap them, I start tossing food in at the same time every morning, and it takes about 3 weeks for coots. Marty, you banded coots just recently. About how long did it take you to get your coots habituated to baiting?
Well, it depends on how much activity is going on around. 3 weeks to a month, sometimes a month and a half, if things are changing around the wetland.
So Marty was saying sometimes up to a month for her if conditions are changing at the wetlands that she's been banding at. For me, at least, the coots are habituated to me. I mean, I know many of them since they were an egg and a baby, and so they know who I am. They come up to me and ask for breakfast, which is really nice. If you can volunteer at a wastewater facility, go for it. So what happened with this facility is I've been working with the employees for a long time, and they now maintain both of the ponds, one water level for stilts and one water level for coots. And by the way, this is the location that I discovered cooperative breeding of Hawaiian stilts at. So at this location right here, I abandoned 5 generations of Hawaiian stilts. I have a family genealogy set up on the back table there. There's over 100 birds in it. Most of them are banded. And this one pond here that's on the low side, that's where all of the nests are. That is a family territory. So sometimes when you go out in a wetland and you're looking at 25 birds, they could all be mom, dad, the kids, and the grandkids, and the first cousins, and all be defending that territory. So it's not a whole bunch of different birds. They're all related. Baiting traps. So we talked about mango is a really good one. We got whole corn, banana. The curlews really like peanuts. They like to take them and toss them and fling them. And then they'll go over to a rock and they'll try tapping the peanuts on the stone. Colorful cat food, great. Aquaculture farm, if your birds are habituated to being fed, I'd say try fish pellets as bait. You know, with a whoosh net, just like what I had just explained at the one on Molokai. Here's some other ones that are freeze-dried. So I use all of these in various conditions. And then I have, on the right here, all plastic baits, haha. Wood decoys are really awesome. Hand-carved decoys can be pricey though. They range from about $150 to $400 each. They can sometimes be picked up on eBay for under $100. I have 2 boxes filled with decoys, and it's all mixed flock of shorebirds. Both Marty and I have these stilts here that were carved by Brad Falkenberg in, what state does he live in? Michigan, Minnesota? Minnesota. These other ones in the middle were carved by Dave, I can't remember his name right now, on the East Coast. David Rhodes, yes, thank you. David Rhodes, he's a very well-known shorebird carver, so he made all of the other ones that are here. Plastic decoys work just as good, and they're really cheap. The plovers, you can pick up sometimes the plovers for $5 each on eBay. But what's really nice about the plastic also is that you can paint them. So here's Marty painting plovers. She spent a couple of days on them. You can pick up these tin decoys that you see here in the lower left for really cheap on eBay. Plovers, shorebirds, you can even use a piece of cardboard cut to their shape and use that as a decoy. Up above I have wooden eggs that I've painted. Some are painted like coot eggs, some are painted like stilt eggs. I do that because the curlews, what I've noticed on the aquaculture farms, is they eat the stilt eggs. Causes quite a ruckus. So by putting out these eggs, it draws the curlews in. Be creative. Yes, all of these are baits. So the curlews, they love auto parts for some reason. They just love them. They go up to them, they flip them up in the air, they try and bang them around, they argue with them, they tug at them. Interesting thing about, let's say, the curlews, though, if that's one of your target species, is like these little shrimp that are up here. If I were to use those shrimp at the Senior Citizen Center, the curlews totally ignore them. If I use the shrimp at the aquaculture farm, I capture my birds. Ditto the other way. If I use the fake cockroaches at the aquaculture farm, the curlews ignore them. If I use them on the lawn at the Senior Citizen Center, I get my curlews. So take your bait and try and apply it to the location where that bait might be found, because the birds are smart. I also use Nile berries and naupaka berries in wetlands where the birds would normally be able to find them, and I have really great success with that. The curlews especially like the Nile berries. Did you hear that, Butch? Yay. We're now getting curlews at the Mokio Preserve. This is what my bait box looks like. This way I can just pick it up and go. So I take monofilament line. I know, I can see people here nodding their heads like, wow, this is crazy, but you need it sometimes. So I put my monofilament line on a kite reel, and I put my bait at the very end, and I run the bait way, way, way out, and then sit in the bushes and just start reeling the bait in, and the curlews or the shorebirds, plovers, coots, whatever it is, will start following that bait into the capture zone for the wash net.